Hey, Vinyl community, it's Mazzy here, and I'm with Jonathan of Cheap and Cheerful Records or Vinyl
Collector.
Records.
Cheap
Vinyl.
and cheerful record collector.
There we go. Which we
I,
all are. We're all cheap and
yeah.
cheerful. Jonathan is in Maine, and I'm in
Yep.
Seattle. Hi, Jonathan. Welcome.
Hey, how you doing? It's
Great.
good.
Jonathan
Good.
had an idea of this one, I believe, and we're kind of each going to show more or less 10 records or artists based on venues and
That's good.
based on venues we've been to. Um, in my case, most of these are the specific shows I went to at a venue. A couple are the tour and not the exact recording from that venue, but on that tour of that year. Again, more or less, and I'm
Yeah,
sure it'll be a,
I thought it was gonna be more of a battle of the bands, East Coast, West Coast.
oh, okay. Well, yes.
Well, that's what I was under the impression we were doing. That's cool. Either
Well,
way.
no, but actually, most of these are, except there are a couple that actually I have two artists. Well, we'll see. Well, yeah, there's a
So I'm looking. I've seen most of these bands, but not all of them.
okay.
So
Well, there's
we'll take.
definitely an East Coast West Coast band thing, and I may jump in and I may jump out of frame and grab something if I feel an adjustment is necessary.
Absolutely.
So I think I already have one little adjustment here, but why don't, since I'm the home team, I'm going to end up, so you're the visiting team, so you get to start out.
Okay. So first East Coast band, seminal East Coast band, actually started out in 1957 with a different name, and they were originally known as Tom and Jerry.
Ah,
And they had a song called "Hey Schoolgirl," which was a very Everly Brothers kind of song. And then in 1963, they went to their real name, and of course, they are Simon and Garfunkel.
there we go.
I mean, you can't be any more East Coast New York than Simon and Garfunkel.
Brooklyn, right?
Queens.
Oh, Queens. I'm sorry. See, I should know better. I should have
Yeah,
known this. Of course, one of my favorites.
they're from Queens. I saw them twice, actually. I saw them once at a Murray the K show in New York City that featured Wilson Pickett, Cream, The Who, Simon and Garfunkel, Mitch Ryder, all in one show.
Nice.
And then I saw them again my freshman year in college. We had a homecoming. They had two shows for homecoming. They had a dance and they had a concert. So Simon and Garfunkel did the concert, which I went to, and the dance was Tommy James and the Shondells, which
Nice.
I couldn't go. I mean, I was like, come on, you're not having the Grateful Dead, you're not having Jimi Hendrix and Tommy James. I mean, come on. So I didn't go to that show, but the typical quintessential New York band.
Yeah, totally. I never saw them live together, unfortunately. I did see Paul Simon separately. Sounds of Silence was the first 45 of theirs I got. I didn't get their albums until Bookends, which is later, which is 1968, which
Yeah,
to
yeah,
me is my favorite Simon and Garfunkel record. It's that bridge between their real folk stuff, trying to
yeah.
get a little psychedelic in their own folk way, and not as much as I love Bridge Over Troubled Water. It's got to be a little schmaltzy for me, but I love it anyway.
Caution
Uh,
Sage was Mary and Time and Bookends. Those two albums are just so
totally. I mean,
great, amazing.
great record.
Yeah, I never saw Paul by himself, which is a shame. I never got to see the any of those tours he did on his own. So
Yeah, well,
yeah.
that's definitely a good one. Okay, uh, I'm going to start out with the good old Grateful Dead, and I have a ton of Grateful Dead, so I don't even know where to start. But since my take on this was going to be venues I went to and shows more or less I saw from tours, I'm going
Mhm.
to show this right away. This is not the first time I saw the Grateful Dead. I first saw the Grateful Dead in Golden Gate Park at the Hall of Flowers in 1968, and then I saw them so many times. My favorite period is really sort of 1967 to 1977 or 78. I jumped on the bandwagon. I jumped off the bandwagon there for a while. I did see them once or twice in the 80s and once in the 90s, and I fell off. But um, I really was into them by seeing them in the early 70s, mostly at Winterland. This was a show at the Family Dog on the Great Highway, San Francisco, which is
Okay.
at the edge of Golden Gate Park, just below the Cliff House. And it was a venue that it was just a rectangular building that had a roller skating rink for a while. It had slot card tracks for a while. It went through a lot of incarnations, and for a while, they had shows there starting around 1970 and 71, put on by the Family Dog, which was Chet Helms, who had the
Right.
Avalon Ballroom, that collective.
Yeah.
This show was not billed as a Grateful Dead concert. It was billed as these solo. So it was Mickey Hart and a Heartbeats, Bobby, Ace, and the Cards, which is obviously Bob Weir.
Right.
And it was an acoustic show, but basically the entire Dead were there, and they did it. And this is
Never seen that album.
Store Day issue.
Oh.
Really good. More the acoustic side of the Grateful Dead.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same thing with the Dead, I do have a lot of records, but I'm showing this, which is a CD. I wasn't going to show a CD box, but this is the complete Winterland 1973 shows. And they would do Winterland a lot. And I saw so many New Year's Eve shows at Winterland, 71, 72,
Wow,
72, 73, maybe 73. At one point, they skipped one, and instead the Allman Brothers played at the Cow Palace that year that I went to, because for some reason the Dead took a break there. But when they would do a series of 4, 5, 6 shows at Winterland, I usually went to 2 or 3 of them. So I went to 2 of these shows.
I only got to the Dead twice. I saw them in '67 at the Fillmore East.
Yep.
And the opening band was Jeff Beck's band with this new singer that I had never heard of, who was prancing around on stage. And I turned to my friend and I go, "Who's this guy who thinks he's Mick Jagger?" Rod Stewart, obviously.
Of course.
I saw them then, and I saw them later on in New York, probably '71 or '72, with the New Riders opening up.
Wow.
And that was in a big dance hall, no seats.
Right.
And it was a summer night, and they must have played for 4 or 5 hours, easily.
The whole adage, there's nothing like a Grateful Dead concert, is so true. And you have to experience, and I mean, you can listen to all these live records. And if you really, there's people that are so into the tapes and the records and the CDs. And if you listen to it closely, there's a lot of off-tune bad singing in there.
Oh,
but
off-tune guitar playing too.
Yeah, but when they get into a certain groove, it can be just a beautiful thing. And Winterland was my go-to thing. I only went to the Fillmore West once, and that was to see the Who perform Tommy in 1969. Because I'm a few years younger than you, but I was at the tail end of the age thing. I think I was 15 when I saw the Who perform at Tommy at the Fillmore West, but then he closed it down and he started doing more shows on Winterland. So literally every week I was at Winterland seeing these great shows. So there you go.
My next one is going to be a little out of left field, a little more esoteric, shall we say.
Okay.
Another quintessential New York experimental band is the Fugs. Tuli Kupferberg, Ed Sanders.
Right. Never saw them.
I saw them probably when I was 16, so probably 1965 or so. I had a friend who I went to summer camp, of course. I met a guy in summer camp. We were friends. His parents lived in Greenwich Village. And we'd go hang out in the village together. And one day he said, "Well, you got to go see this group." And he took me to this place. And it was the most startling experience I had as a teenager. I mean, they were so out there. They were so beyond anything I was used to. They had one set where they turned all the lights off in the show, in the auditorium.
Wow.
It was completely pitch black. And they went into like a 15-minute free jazz, crazy thing. And it was like, my first psychedelic experience without drugs. It was like crazy. So the Fugs were definitely downtown New York scene. Kill for Peace, Virgin Forest, Dirty Old Man, Group Grope. I mean, the classics.
Wow.
So Ed Sanders, Tuli Kupferberg, Ken Weaver, the Fugs.
Wow.
Oh, an interesting thing, when I was out in California, we were out in LA, and we took a tour of the Paramount studio.
Mm-hmm.
So they're taking us around different places. They take us into the prop room, and there's like Batman's car and all this other stuff in the prop room. And way up high on the ceiling is a sign that says the Fugs. And I asked her, the guide, I said, what's that sign doing here? She goes, everybody wants to, who is that? Everybody, all the guides want to know. They never heard of them. Well, what is the Fugs? I had to explain to her what the Fugs were.
Wow. That's a fun one.
It was just so random, in the middle of the Hollywood Paramount studio.
I have, I think, one of their albums on ESP, and then the Warner Reprise record, or the
I have a couple of them.
Reprise.
This was the one I love. This is the ESP disc, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. ESP was notorious for not paying their artists any money.
I know. I'm a big, which I don't know if you included, but I'm a big fan of Tom Rapp and Pearls Before Swine.
Yeah.
They were on ESP, and they got screwed because it was a jazz label, but they even screwed their jazz artists too.
Yeah.
I don't usually do this. I'm putting this on pause for 1 minute, so we're going to pause record, and we'll be right back.
I'm going to show it to you. Pearls Before Swine.
There we go. We're recording again. I have all their records. I love them.
This is the only one I have. This is on ESP. This is one of the early ones, one of the early pressings on the white and brown ESP label.
Yeah, Tom Rapp just passed away, 2 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last year. But yeah, I have Pearls Before Swine. Anyway,
okay.
All right, you're up.
San Francisco. I mean, again, being 65-year-old now, I kind of grew up during that perfect time. I was on the tail end of it, so a little young. I was bar mitzvahed at the end of the Summer of Love in San Francisco, so September 1967.
Yes,
I would walk down Haight Street and be in Golden Gate Park with my friends, so I was able to see a lot of the bands. If not going to the shows initially, there was all these free shows on Haight Street and the Panhandle and what they call Hippie Hill and Speedway Meadows in Golden Gate Park. So we'd ride our bikes there. My parents didn't want me going to the Fillmore because they thought I was going to get spiked, acid or something. Typical stuff. But I'd say aside from the two bands were my favorites. One was obviously the Grateful Dead. I said that, or three bands. Quicksilver Messenger Service, and I just loved, especially their first two albums, and Happy Trails live album. I saw them at Winterland again. Did not see them at the Fillmore. I love John Cipollina's guitar playing, that kind of SG sound, and Gary Duncan, who sang and played guitar. Gary Duncan doesn't get a lot of love as a guitar player. They always think it's all Cipollina, but if you look at on YouTube and everywhere else, the dueling guitar solo, especially on side one of this, which is all live, Who Do You Love? This is recorded at both the Fillmore East and the Fillmore West. Great record, great album cover. So this, and then I have a series of these sort of later, they're not really bootleg records because Gary Duncan kept these tapes and issued some of these live recordings from them in the 60s. Some are better than others, but it's almost like a specimen piece or an archival sound look at Quicksilver. But love this band.
Those records you're showing, those are the original band.
This is the original band. This is
towards the end they sort of drifted off and they had some.
Well, that's a whole other thing. I've said this in my video. This is 1967, the Fillmore.
Okay.
Dena Valenti, to me, is problematic with this band because he was original member, then he got busted and went to prison. Right. And so he never was on their first three records. And he did do one great record, a acoustic folk record on Epic Records, Columbia Epic, which is very haunting, and acoustic guitar 12-string, which I love. But then when he got out of prison, he came back, and they actually had their biggest hit with him, Have Another Hit. But I don't like that drenched reverb sound he did and everything, and it just became this different band, and it got to be all about Dena Valenti. And no offense to the guy, I prefer him better before that. And I think they lost the special edge they have.
Yeah.
But this is actually a good one. This is a 1968 show. So again, this is the original band. Again, I believe without Dena Valenti. He would play with them early on, but once they got their Capitol recording contract and their first record on Capitol in 1968, There's that song on there called Dino's Song about him, or maybe he wrote it. I forgot now. But Quicksilver.
All right, cool. Another band is another New York band from Long Island, and very New York band is the Young Rascals.
Oh yeah. Oh,
You know,
and that record is so great.
oh, fucking great album, man. Unbelievable.
Every
And
song on that album is great.
it really is, and it's great album. Felix Cavallari, etc. I love the story about the song "Groovin'," and he said they were in Central Park on a summer day with a couple of guys playing guitars, and he said, "I'm just sitting there, and the song came to me from out of the sky." It's just like there it was. And I was looking around, I started playing guitar, and the whole song just came to me and said, in 15 minutes, they had the whole song written.
Great song. That
And
was
yeah,
probably, was it 1966 or 67? 67 probably.
yeah. Actually, they formed in '65 in I'm sorry, no, they were New Jersey. Formed in '65 in New Jersey. I don't know when this record. This record is '67.
67, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
'67.
I mean, it's perfect summer of love type record,
Oh,
East Coast version.
fantastic.
Right. Yeah, Good
Yeah.
Lovin'. I mean, there's those first few albums were really amazing. But that album is a must-have, I would
Yeah.
say.
This doesn't have a good love. This is just a grooving on it. It's a hit off this one.
Right, right.
But other great songs on here and a great album.
There was a whole different scene going on, obviously, between New York and the East Coast and San Francisco. San Francisco early on, 66 and 67, probably had a little more pattern like the London psychedelic thing with Pink Floyd and the UFO clubs. Different. It wasn't as blues based as the East Coast, and not as that like your buddy wrote, blue eyed soul stuff going
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
Uh, you know,
Well,
like
there's
Shamrock,
the famous story about Laura Nero when she went to the the festival in '67,
Monterey.
Monterey, and Monterey Pop, and she was going to be like the new big thing, and everybody in the West Coast was all dressed in flowers and all peace and love and stuff, and she gets up there dressed in black and sits at the piano and sings her dirgy kind of songs, and just didn't go over at all. Just
Whole different thing. I first went to New York in 1978. That was my first trip there. So it was a whole different thing by then. It was,
yeah,
going to the Bottom Line. I went to CBGB. I mean, things like that. During the,
yep.
punk thing was kind of happening, and that whole thing. But it was a different feel. I mean, in San Francisco, everything was, in theory, the whole love, easygoing, jammy thing, except for a few bands.
Whole East Coast is much grittier.
Yeah. I mean,
New York,
the only band that San Francisco had early on, which I don't have, I should have pulled it actually, was the Flamin' Groovies, that had sort of a rock and roll retro '50s sound, and they were really an aberration for what was going on in San Francisco at the time. It wasn't the same thing.
Yeah.
So, yep. All right, I'm going to go with the Steve Miller Band. I'm staying with San Francisco Psychedelia. Obviously, Steve Miller and Boz Scaggs came from Texas and Oklahoma. They were buddies in school in Texas, but they came early on in '67, late '66, to San Francisco. And they originally the blues
is
band.
Boz Scaggs still in the band here?
Pardon me?
Was Boz still in the band?
Yeah, Boz Scaggs is on. This is their first album. He was on their first two records.
Yeah.
And originally, before they actually recorded this album, it was the Steve Miller Blues Band, and he had a real blues experience. I love and I miss Boz Scaggs. He was only on the first two records, this and Sailor, this one.
Fantastic.
Glenn Johns produced these. This was actually recorded in London. They got this big advance, and they went, and, whatever reason, recorded it in London with Glenn Johns. And I fell in love with this record. And I'm one of these proponents of the first 5 or 6 Steve Miller albums. As much as I, love when I'm good for any musician to get commercial and finally sell records, with the Joker and, the Pompous of Love. I prefer this stuff by far. And it's not as commercial, although, I mean, they did on the 3rd or 4th album, Space Cowboy. And so they had kind of, semi-regional hits at the time. It wasn't until later, but I'm amazed at Capitol Records. I mean, they must have had a good deal, because Capitol Records stuck with them for 6, 7 albums before they really started even selling. But I saw them once early on, and then I saw the Steve Miller Band again at Winterland in '73 or '4. And what's great about it, he's an amazing guitar player. He always did an
yeah.
acoustic set. Um, but and also I'm a big Boz Scaggs fan, and he's included here later in my.
Is the Sailor, is that a right or a left open?
This is actually not an. This is a UK reissue. This was like a '70s. But no, yeah, this is a British reissue.
I remember the original Americans opened up on the wrong side.
Yeah.
The first pressing opened up on the right, not the left.
Quicksilver Girl is a great song on here.
Oh, the whole album is great.
Yeah, yeah.
Give me a cheeseburger. Give me a cheeseburger.
Yep, yep. Living in the USA.
That's it. All right. So now I got a band that for me was our house band, our New York City house band. And they played everywhere. And I saw them multiple times. And the Blues Project.
Uh-huh.
Al Kooper and the Blues Project. They played at the Cafe A Go-Go down in the city. And we would go down there, and I saw them half a dozen times there. And funnily or interestingly, Richie Havens always opened up for them.
Ah.
So I knew Richie before Woodstock. He always opened up for them. And but Al Kooper and Danny Kalb, etc. I mean, this was the band. This was the album. I saw them as they backed up Chuck Berry.
Wow. Everybody, I think everybody backed up Chuck Berry.
At the Phil Maurice before it became the Phil Maurice.
Right.
Chuck used to travel around and just play with every local band.
He picked up bands everywhere, all kinds of musicians. They figured, you know my stuff, we're just playing.
That was a story he said to Springsteen. I heard Springsteen talking about it with his band, and they were going to back up Chuck Berry before they hit it big.
Right.
And they were all waiting for him to show up, and they didn't know what songs they're going to play or what key they were going to be in. And 5 minutes before the show, Chuck Berry walks up, comes through the back door, and says, all right, we're going to play Chuck Berry songs. Try to keep up.
Exactly. And I have a bunch, or not a bunch, a handful of Vanguard folk albums that Danny Kalb plays like second guitar on everything.
Yeah, I have one or two of those also.
Yeah.
A couple albums. I mean, the first album was a live album, live at the Cafe Go-Go. This was their second, was the real breakthrough album for them.
Right. I have that record. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like when they morphed into C-Train.
Right. C-Train and Blood, Sweat, and Tears.
Yeah. They kind of went in a couple different directions and things, but yeah.
Al Kooper formed Blood, Sweat, and Tears with Steve Katz, and then the other guys went off and started C-Train.
Right.
And then he did one album with Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and they kicked him out of his own band.
Yeah, exactly. And he became like sort of the producer A&R guy for Columbia Records, and obviously the Super Session, which he brought in with Mike Bloomfield. Yeah, and Bloomfield doesn't show up for one day, and Steve Stills shows up for one side.
Yeah, well, Bloomfield, I think Bloomfield was drugs and stuff, and he just couldn't make the second day. And then he called Steve Stills, and he came in and filled in.
Right. With the live album. That live album.
Both of them, yeah. Both of those.
The last day he didn't show up or something. I mean, it's amazing.
And these guys actually played my high school also.
Wow.
Just another thing. So, yeah, these were like our hometown band. This is the band everybody knew, everybody saw all the time. And love the Blues Project. Can't Keep From Crying, Steve's song, Two Trains Running, Wake Me, Shake Me, Flute Thing, Fly Away. I mean, just great stuff. So that's my choice for a New York band.
The next band I show all the time, and this isn't even one of their best albums, but I always show the same old album, Jefferson Airplane. Now, obviously, Sadistic Pillow, Volunteers, Crown of Creation, even the first folk rock album. And I always show those records. I never show this record. And the only reason I'm showing this one, this was to me, the last decent breath of the Jefferson Airplane before they really morphed and split up and became the Starship, which I'm not a fan of for the most part. Papa John Creech is on here, which I have a love-hate with him because everyone used to call him Papa John Screech because it had screechy violin sound. I joined this because this was Winterland 73, and I was at this show when they recorded, so that's why I put it on here. I think it's a good record. They have, I think, Johnny Barbado on drums, and I really missed when they had Spencer Dryden. I think he was a perfect drummer for the Jefferson Airplane. But Jefferson Airplane is by far my favorite of the San Francisco psychedelic 60s rock bands. when they were live, there was nothing like them. I mean, the Dead were great in their own way, but the rhythm section of Spencer Dryden and uh, Jack Cassidy on bass, he's an amazing record. And I probably should have pulled, and I've showed it so many times again, Bless His Poor Little Head. That live album is an incredible sounding live album. The drums and bass on that are great. Obviously, they had two perfect vocalists with Marty Ballin and Grace Slick. Marty's not even on this record. He was kind of gone for a while by then. And
I actually saw them in '67 at the Fillmore East, my senior year in high school, and H.P. Lovecraft was the opening band.
wow. I have that first record on, is it not Electro? What is it? The purplish cover. I forgot that what it's on.
I just got the live album they put out.
Oh, wow.
Fast Live.
I don't know that one.
Oh, hang on. It's right here.
Yeah.
Keep talking.
Just keep talking as you get that. But the Jefferson Airplane, I saw them again in Golden Gate Park. Paul Kantner, great songwriter. He was like their third good singer, not great. And Jorma Kaukonen, and obviously many of you know Jorma and Jack formed Hot Tuna. A lot of spin-offs, but I saw them several times, and I saw them 68, saw them 69, 70. I would go see them a bunch of times at Winterland and in Golden Gate Park whenever they had a chance. This is not the album to start with. I don't even know that record.
This is a new release, but it was recorded live May 11th, 1968.
Wow.
So this is right when I saw them in June of '68. So I saw them like a month after it was recorded.
How does it sound? Does it sound pretty good?
It sounds so much better than I expected.
Wow.
I definitely recommend it. It's fantastic. Mastered by Bob Irwin. Yeah, I'm trying to see where it was recorded. So doing it, blah, blah, blah. They were a Chicago band initially. But yeah, I would definitely, if you don't know, if you know H. Lovecraft just a little bit.
Well, I have that one. Oh, Philip. I think it's on Phillips Records, that one with the purple cover, that first H.P. Lovecraft album.
This is a Sundazed
right.
pressing, but it really captures them live. I mean, it really is. It's a fantastic record.
Nice.
Anyway, H.P. Lovecraft. So they're the ones I saw open up for the.
Okay, your turn.
All right, my turn. It's sort of obvious. I mean, again, another quintessential New York band, the Velvet Underground. I mean, you know, you can't not show the Velvet Underground. This is funny. This one I picked up. A friend of ours were downsizing. They were going from a house to a condo, and they gave me like 4 boxes of records. So I'm going through the records, and this was there, but there was no record inside. There was no record inside it. I couldn't believe it. So I finally looked and finally found a record and sort of Frankensteined them together. But then this was the album that they say they only sold 1,500 copies, but everybody who bought one started a band. Right? You know that story.
Yep, I do.
Yeah, they only sold like 1,500 copies, but everybody who started a band bought one.
Everybody had one. I mean, that's again one of those major influence records. I was in junior high school. That came out in '67 again.
67, yeah.
I was in junior high school, and a few months after it came out, I had a music teacher that every Friday, this is typical San Francisco '60s, would turn out the lights in the music room and play a record. And she put on that record, and looking back on it, and I actually bought it after that because this music store had it. So but I don't have that copy. I got lost or something, but I do have a '70s edition, and the banana's intact. But I remember looking back on it. Can you imagine these days if a teacher came in and played a song about heroin?
Oh my God! Oh my!
You know,
and sadomasochism.
You know, their faces would melt. They'd get all pissy. I mean, none of us were going to go shoot up after listening to that song. But I got into it, and I got into a lot of great music because of that. And that was one of them.
So a great album.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff. And the banana's intact. And like I said, when I got it, there was no record inside.
Wow.
So then I went around and I finally found a copy of the record in a bad cover. So I sort of Frankensteined them together.
Perfect. Hey, whatever it takes.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm really happy to have that in my collection.
Obviously, when the Woodstock movie came out in 1970, one of the major scenes in that movie was Michael Shreve's drum solo split screen on Santana, and that really pushed them over the top. The record had just come out, as I recall.
Yep.
I love this record, and there's a lot of music on here. You know, a lot of this stuff is covers. And funny, the interesting thing, a lot of people to this day,
Abraxas and that one.
yeah, people don't. A lot of people who don't really know to this day don't realize that "Black Magic Woman" was a Fleetwood Mac cover. Right. Oye Como Va. I mean, they did Tito Puente covers, Latin music, but Carlos Santana
together, fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, these are, and it's a cliche to show these two records, especially, but these are amazing records. I would even say, you know, this is probably the last grade of the full original band. It doesn't get as much play in a lot of circles as this, but you know, that it begat Journey. I'm not a big fan of Journey in that kind of arena rock.
I'm definitely not a prog guy, and I'm not interested.
Yeah, I mean, they're just, yeah, I just not into that. But these records to me are perfect records, especially these two. But this record, when it came out, I was playing with some friends in a band, and we started doing Evil Ways because it was just an easy song, an E minor, and I think an A minor, whatever it was, easy song to play. Obviously, we didn't have the congas or percussion, but great band, great Bay Area band.
I saw them about 3 weeks before Woodstock at a play at the Atlantic City Pop Festival.
Wow.
Which was about 3 weeks before Woodstock, and that had Santana. When they introduced them as Santana Blues Band.
Yeah, they were, again,
Carlos came out and he goes, "Thanks for the introduction we're not a blues band." And then they went into their stuff, and no one had ever heard them.
Yeah, there was a bunch of, that was like the thing. I think a lot of these bands from like New York and San Francisco were jumping off all these British bands that were kind of taking over the American blues thing, like the Yardbirds, and they would do the blues thing. But in America, they had to call it a blues band for all, but then they dropped the blues names. Maybe they didn't want to peg themselves, like Santana and Steve Miller, and yeah.
Even Paul Butterfield stopped calling himself blues band. It was just
right.
Yeah, after a while.
Okay.
All right. So who went last?
I did.
Okay. Here's another New York band. They formed in '67, and they became the house band for John and Yoko.
Old memory.
So they were a real New York City downtown Lower East Side band, and there's the great gatefold, and they became John and Yoko's house band. They played for them, backed them up, all over.
Did you like them?
Elvis Memory?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they're a little sloppy.
Yeah, I mean, they're not, but that's why John liked them, I think.
Yeah, because when I heard
they weren't slick, and they weren't,
Did they back him on that 1-to-1 concert at Madison Square? Was that them?
I think so.
I think so, yeah. And it just always seemed kind of sloppy for him, but maybe John didn't give a shit then. I don't know.
But anyway, I just thought I'd show that because it's sort of definitely an East Coast New York City band.
Okay.
And I listened to it this morning, and I was like, nah, men's a men's.
I have that, yeah. I have that just because of my Beatles collection, anything connected, and it's not very good.
I got
it. Sorry. All right. I'm going to, we mentioned him before. I'm going to Boz Scaggs. Now, Boz Scaggs again, Steve Miller Band on their first two records.
Right.
He doesn't get a lot of love around here on the VC. Blue-Eyed Soul again. His first album on Atlantic Records was produced by Jan Wenner, ironically, from the Rolling Stone magazine. Had all the Muscle Shoals people. Has a great FM staple, Loan Me a Dime with Duane Allman on guitar. He's a good guitar player in his own right, really great solos. He signed to Columbia after that first album, did a series, 4, 5, 6 albums that are really good. Boz Scaggs and Band. He had a kind of a blues band with horns, did covers of like Dinah Flow, did Alan Toussaint stuff, really good. This record started breaking, produced by Johnny Bristol, so it has like that soul Philly sound.
Okay,
slick, some people think it's too slick, but I fell in love with this song. Now, Andy Leibovitz did the cover, horrible record cover. But then in San Francisco, he did a show that was a major show, and this is by 1974, I believe.
Yeah. I was going to say when the album was released. Yeah.
He did this at the Paramount Theater, big deco, wonderful theater. Bill Graham presents. That was his wife at the time, Carmela.
And then they re-released the album with that as the cover.
And then they put this album on the cover. And
Album, yeah.
it was a black tie optional show. We all had to wear tuxes or 70s version of tuxes. And of course, everyone knows after this, Silk Degrees came out, one of the biggest selling albums of 1976. Huge.
Fantastic.
Some people think it's too slick and everything, but his records on Columbia, I have them all. I've seen them many times early on, even before this gig. Such a great singer, songwriter. Again, he's gotten a little slick over the years, but he's done some blues records, blues fusion records. And I'm a big fan of Boz Scaggs. He's still in San Francisco. He still tours. He's done some, shows like with Michael McDonald, who I'm not really a fan of. That a little too slick for that Doobie Brothers for my taste.
There's an album of his, I think I got on CD, Boz Scaggs. It shows like a 1959 Cadillac on the cover, black and white.
Yeah.
That's a great album.
I have all his records, and I still buy his records.
I remember the name, but that was a great album.
He's done more bluesy versions. There's actually a great live video of him at the Great American Music Hall, a show I saw, where he does all these more bluesy versions of his hits, even songs like Lido. And the songs he did from Silk Degrees, he's gotten more sort of an intro, personal bluesy version.
I'd like to hear that. Sounds good. Now moving into the 1970s, and I got to say there are two bands that I don't have records of that I would have shown if I did. Quintessential 70s New York bands. I don't have any Ramones. Shockingly.
Oh, damn.
And I don't have any New York Dolls. And to me, those are like real quintessential 70s New York bands.
Absolutely.
I don't have any, I can't show those for some reason. Brian said he'd lend them to me, but I said, that's not fair.
That's such a tease. You just teased us all. You teased the vinyl community, Jonathan.
So I went with another great New York band as Television.
Oh, yeah.
Marty Moon. Never got to see them, but I mean, to me, they speak of mid-70s New York like nobody does. Just fantastic album. You know this record, obviously.
Of course.
Fantastic record. Fantastic band.
Yep.
Not much time to say about it. Everybody knows this record. Tom Vreeland.
Again, one of those voices you have to be into, because it's not a great voice, but it's a style.
The emotion and the way he puts a song across, it's just
right.
fantastic.
I like the guitar playing of Richard Lloyd in that. I have a solo album by Richard Lloyd. That's mostly instrumental. That's on CD. That's really good. The other guitar.
Really, I'll have to look for that. But there you go.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool.
My next pick is not a San Francisco band. When I was kind of going into this and pulling these records, I was thinking, as much as I think about San Francisco bands, I was thinking about San Francisco venues and concerts that to me were very special in my life growing up in San Francisco. So in 1976, I paid $25 for a ticket, and all my friends thought we were crazy. Tickets then were $4, $5, $6.
Yeah.
But this concert, it was a special night, and it included a Thanksgiving dinner, and that's the last waltz.
Wow.
Now, if you don't know, the reason the band they were basically calling it a day. There's revisionist history of why they did this, but that's.
I just read Levon Helm's book a couple of months ago.
You should read that, but also I suggest you watch. I think it's on. I don't know if it's on Netflix or Apple TV
or whatever it's called.
The band documentary. Basically it's based on Robbie Robertson's autobiography, so it definitely takes his thing on it, and he addresses some of the stuff that Levon, I did read that too, talks about, because he basically wrote the songs, owned the publishing, and that's a whole other story.
Yes.
But the reason they decided to do the show Winterland, because the first show the band played as the band in their history was at Winterland. I saw them several times over the years. I saw them at Stanford University, outside at Frost Amphitheater. I saw them at the Civic Auditorium in San Francisco. But they decided to put this together and invite all their friends back. And a number of their friends were from San Francisco. Not all of them. Obviously, a lot of New Yorkers here too, because aside from the band, that were mostly Canadian, except for Levon Helm. Paul Butterfield was there, so there's your New Yorker. Emmylou Harris was there. Van Morrison, who at the time was living in the Bay Area. Neil Young, who was living in the Bay Area also at the time. But you got Joni Mitchell, Emmylou Harris. Well, Emmylou Harris wasn't at the show. That was later. Eric Clapton, Ringo Starr. One of the most amazing experiences, obviously everyone knows, if they don't, the film, the Martin Scorsese film, but one of the best.
I saw the film on opening day in New York City.
Exactly. The film
we were there.
The film came out 2 years after the concert. They had, one of the big famous stories was they had a little, before digital, they had to retouch every frame to get the big rock of cocaine out of Neil Young's nostril shooting up at him. But what a great show. And nobody knew who was going to perform, Muddy Waters, and they just kept coming out.
I'm going.
Van Morrison was one of the highlights. The odd man out at the time, Neil Diamond. But looking back on it, I don't mind it as much. But
I remember the thing in the book I read was Levon Helm, when Robbie Robertson tells him that Neil Diamond is going to be there. Levon Helm goes, "Who the fuck is Neil Diamond?"
Well, Robbie, it turns out, a little promotion. He just produced
really had no connection to the band.
No.
At all.
It was. But it was a great night. And San Francisco, again, Winterland is my venue, and it comes up another time, I believe. Maybe not. Yeah. Well, anyway, your turn.
Yeah. All right. That must have been amazing. Like I said, we were there for opening day of the movie in New York City, and called in sick to work because it was more important to see the movie, than go to work.
Right.
Another New York band, actually a singer who I saw right after this came out, another quintessential downtown New Yorker, is Patti Smith.
Ah, great.
First album, Horses, 75. I mean, when I first heard this, I was just completely blown away by how amazing this record was.
It was so different. Nothing was like that.
God, it was her take on Gloria and Redondo Beach and Free Money. And oh my God, it was so amazing. And then right after this album came out, she played at a bar right near where I used to live, which is about an hour north of New York City. And there were maybe 50 people in the bar. And she played on a stage that, was 6 inches or a foot off the ground. So it was right there, everybody, and she literally blew the roof off the place.
They liked her?
Oh my God, everyone was crazy.
Because sometimes, quote, you get out in the suburbs at the time when something's new, they don't get it,
This was in a small town, and people were into it, and by the end of people were like dancing on tables and going crazy, and she was amazing performance.
It wasn't Saugerties, New York, or Poughkeepsie, or
a town called Nanuet, New York.
Okay.
And what was the club? I can't remember. The club still was there for a long time. Anyway, so I certainly pick Patti Smith as another quintessential New Yorker.
Perfect.
You read her book, right? Just Kids?
I did, and that's in back. That photograph is Robert Mapplethorpe took the cover of that. Yeah, that's a great book because it's about them growing up as artists and living in New York. And
it was a great book. I didn't read her second one. The one
I haven't read the second one,
but the first one was great.
Yeah.
Cool, Patti Smith. There you go.
Okay, my next one is again about a venue as much as the artist, and the artist is not from San Francisco, but is from the West Coast, from Santa Monica, California. So come on, we're going like east-west.
Yeah.
And once I say, I describe it, you're going to know exactly who I'm talking about, because I think you've watched a few of my videos. My favorite guitar player of all time is Ry Cooder. So Ry Cooder, the irony of Ry Cooder and someone like Randy Newman, who I could have also picked, who's also from LA.
Another one of my favorites.
Both those guys sound like their voice is from the South. They don't seem like LA kids. Being from Santa Monica, Ry Cooder's got this he's got this bluesy old soul in his voice. His voice is not perfect, but to me his guitar playing his playing of any stringed instrument is amazing. I'm showing these two records only because these are records from shows I saw him. I was at both these shows. He played 4 shows at the Greater American Music Hall in 1976. This is Showtime. So he played 4 shows, and I went to all 4 shows, and I was in love with Ry Cooder.
I saw him that show at the Bottom Line.
Yeah, great tour.
At the same time I saw him too.
I mean,
is that Flaco Jimenez in there?
Flacco, and then Terry Evans and Bobby King on vocals.
Yeah.
Seek out online the version of Dark End of the Street where he does that slide guitar solo on this. Amazing. This record, this was from 2013, and this is him again at the Great American Music Hall, a very Latin feel. He had all these Latin kids from his school in the East Bay, and it was, again, Flacco was there, and very similar sound, but obviously decades later. My buddy and I, who I just did a whole eulogy from, Vernon, was a big friend of mine, and him and I stood in the back. The Great American Music Hall is one of my favorite small venues in San Francisco, and right where you come in from the main door, there's a big thick velvet curtain. You can stand by one side of it, and you're literally standing right next to the mixing board, which is just on maybe a foot high riser. So you're right there. And it's the same guy, I forgot his name, that mixes most of the shows. And on that, sitting in a chair like a guest, was Linda Ronstadt watching, because she was a big friend of Ry Cooder's, and obviously Ry sang or played guitar on a lot of her records, and she sang on a lot of his, or a number of his records. This is a beautiful recording. Kate, I'm a non-such. Dark End of the Street again is on here, and it's almost, he does Wooly Bully, which is a great, the garage, Sam and Sham on the Pharaohs, and Sam the Sham would play that, and that whole Austin.
I don't know that record, but I'll have to look for it for sure.
It's a really great record. It's probably a better record than this live record, but I just did them because they're both from the Great American Music Hall. They're both live records, and they're both from shows that I attended. This was great.
I saw Ry at the Bottom Line, and it must have been that same time, because that's the Showtime must have been that same era.
Yeah.
I saw him again. Then I saw him again at the Beacon Theater in New York years later, probably in the late 80s in New York. And I missed him. He came to Portland like a year or two ago, and I missed it. I kicked myself for not going.
Yeah, anytime he comes about, like I saw him this last year in Seattle, and the same show I saw a week later in San Francisco. I went down.
He was touring with Ricky Skaggs or someone like that?
Well, I didn't see that show. And also he was doing a series of shows. There's a place called SF Jazz Center, and they have curated seasons. And the curated season was by Rosanna Cash. Okay. And Ry Cooder and Rosanna Cash did a series of shows where they did all Johnny Cash music. Unfortunately, I missed that show as well, but I would have gone.
One more New York band. They sort of made the CBGBs, and it's Talking Heads.
Oh God, yeah.
Even they formed in '75. This is their first album, Talking Heads '77. Never got to see them live. Just never had. I was living in New York. I was living down on the in Soho in '74, '75, right when CBGBs was really kicking. But I was already, by '74, I was already 25 years old. I was getting a little bit old to go to CBGBs. They were all like 16, 17, 18-year-old kids. I was a little bit, but yeah, one of my favorite bands of all time.
Well, they used to get a lot of airplay when that came out because of Psycho Killer.
Oh, yeah.
And I saw them. There's a venue that unfortunately was torn down years ago called the Boarding House in San Francisco. Great venue. I saw some amazing shows, and I saw that tour with the Talking Heads do that. Right, and they had like this spotlight above they had one of those double doors like you see in New York a lot that protect from the weather.
Yeah, yeah.
It protected it so when you walked in, you wouldn't have the light from outside coming on the stage. Okay. And on top of that was a follow spot. And right in the middle of Psycho Killer, it slipped, and the follow spot came crashing to the floor. Luckily, it didn't hit anybody, but there was a big crash, and everyone looked back and saw it broke on the floor. And of course, they just continued on playing. That could have killed somebody, that thing. But perfect timing.
I had read that Psycho Killer was the first song he ever wrote when he was 17. Amazing. 17 years old.
I had no idea.
That's how I read that somewhere. But yeah, I never got to see them. Of course, the movie Stop Making Sense, I've seen a dozen times or more.
What a great Jonathan Demme. I just was playing yesterday. I wish I saw that show he's doing now, with the All People in Gray. I got that soundtrack. It's
A
pretty
good friend
good.
of mine went to see that in New York City.
I
Friend of
heard
mine
it's great.
here drove down to New York to see it.
Um,
Yeah, Jefferson Demi is he's from that area where I grew up, and he actually, I used to own a store in Portland, and he came in one day, Jonathan Demi, and we started talking, and I said, "You're Jonathan Demi, right?" Yes, it was just funny to have him there.
Silence of the Lambs and
Yeah.
that movie, and he also did the great Heart of Gold, the Neil Young concert film, and I think he did one called Storefront Hitchcock about Robin Hitchcock. He
And
does
he
a lot of music.
passed away young. He died like a year or two ago.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, yeah.
Shame, shame. So what do you
My
got next?
my next artist is a New Yorker.
All
Actually,
right.
he's not a New Yorker, but he's known for being a New Yorker. But he does live in California now, most of the time, not all the time. And he's from the Midwest. But I'm doing it because this is a box set, and it's from a show that within following this artist became sort of infamous. Bob Dylan. His birthday was yesterday, right?
Right.
Day before yesterday. So this is Bob Dylan, Trouble No More. Now, 1979, Warfield Theater. Bob Dylan was going to do 14 shows in a row at the Warfield Theater. I got tickets to the first 3 shows. Now, what's remarkable, good or bad, depending on your point of view of this concert, not unlike for some probably. I was never at Newport when Dylan went electric, but this is when Dylan went Christian on us, went all Jesus on us. He had put out Slow Train Coming, which I love. I think is a great sounding song,
Yeah, a couple
great
of good songs.
record, whatever you say. I'm a big fan of gospel music. Hey, I think you and I are both Jewish here, right?
Yes. Oh yeah.
Okay. But I love spiritual music. I'm not religious in terms of Jesus and all that. But he comes up here, and the first night at the Warfield Theater on Market Street, Bill Graham presents. He sold out, 14 shows, and he comes out and he plays, a few songs from Slow Train, a few other songs. People are starting to yell out, Miss Tambourine Man, like rolling. He plays the entire show, does not one secular song, not one of his hits. Everything was from Slow Train and what would be from his next album, all Jesus Christian material. People were booing, people were walking out.
He doesn't care. He didn't care. He never cared.
I thought it was hysterical.
He does what he does. So you don't like it, that's your problem.
People wanted their money back. They cut hearing rumor. I went to the first 3 shows, and I loved it. I thought it was great. I went to the first 2 shows, and then I went to a later show. I forgot what night it was, but he did one show where Mike Bloomfield showed up and played on stage with him, because obviously he had, I think Dylan used to say Michael Bloomfield is one of the best guitarists he's ever played with. Because,
was that Bloomfield's last performance? Because I heard he played with Dylan. He came on stage in a bathrobe and was sort of out of it, and he played guitar.
That
and it could 3 days later.
It could well be his last live performance. I know, unfortunately, Bloomfield died in San Francisco, OD'd inside a parked car that he was slept in.
But I heard
around that time he was doing he was living in the Bay Area. He was doing soundtracks to porno films for the Mitchell brothers and other people. Sad waste, a wonderful thing. But again, not a San Francisco artist, Hibbing, Minnesota to New York to the West Coast, Malibu, but the Warfield Theater, 14 nights. And all of a sudden, this is the first leg of the tour. And then he does all the Jesus stuff. And then 3 years later, he converts back to Judaism and bar mitzvahs his son at the Wailing Wall.
I know. Did he play the same songs on the second and third nights you were there?
Pretty much, yeah. He had slightly different arrangement, but the same song. Again, I don't remember. Obviously, I'm not one of these people that freak out about Dead shows or Dylan shows. They know every cut. And that's the thing. Doing these friggin' videos on YouTube, there's always someone. I did that hour-and-a-half Neil Young video, and of course, you say shit wrong. I was talking about the Neil Young record with Pearl Jam, and I remember I listened to it back and I said, Eddie Van Halen, wasn't there that night. Well, I meant Eddie Vedder. It just comes out of your mouth. You know how that is.
I was actually at Newport in '65. I was 16 years old, and we were there during the day. and I was a counselor in a camp. So we got off for the day. So we were there for the day, and went to the blues stage, and we saw Paul Butterfield Blues Band with Mike Bloomfield, the original band. And I saw Memphis Slim with Willie Dixon and Mississippi John Hurt, and all these people. And then we had to leave to go back to camp. And that was the night that Dylan went electric.
Wow.
So I missed it because I had to leave and go.
You know, you and I are very fortunate, obviously because of time and place. And I say this a lot, you know,
Yeah.
I have a couple of people that watch my channel that mention, oh my God, you saw these great shows. Part of it was luck and timing. I was in San Francisco at the most amazing time to be in San Francisco. You were in New York at the East Coast, the perfect time. You get me by a few years. So there's certain shows you've seen, other shows I've seen. And it is luck and timing.
I'll grab one record. You keep filling space.
And the thing is, shows were cheap. I saw the Rolling Stones 72. Stevie Wonder opened up XL on Main Street. Tickets were $5.50. I'd go to Winterland. I saw Pink Floyd, which I said in that Pink Floyd video, 6 months before Dark Side of the Moon came out. Tickets were $4 or $5, and they played the entire Dark Side of the Moon. It was just luck and timing. Same with the later in the punk scene. I didn't include it like Dead Kennedys or any punk stuff today, but going to the Mabuhay Gardens, I mean, it was cheap and it was loud, and there were a lot of terrible bands, but it was a fun there being in the moment, right?
When I lived in New York City in the early 70s, they used to have concerts in Central Park in the summertime at Woman's Skating Rink, and it was $1 to get in. Saw Country Joe and the Fish, saw Peter Tosh, I saw Benny Goodman's big band. I mean, how could you not go see Benny Goodman for $1 on a summer's night in New York City?
Well, that's like the Woody, I'm trying to think, the Woody Herman big band opened up for the Who at the Fillmore doing Tommy.
Woody Herman is Thundering Herd.
Right. God, I mean, amazing.
So I didn't have this, so I just dragged this out as a concert that I went to. It was a West Coast band, but I saw them here in New York, and it's Frank Zappa at the Fillmore East. And I was at this show in June '71. And they used to play at the Fillmore. They had 2 shows a night, early show and a late show. And it was a Sunday night, and I had a job, so I had to go to the early show because I had to get up in the morning and go to work the next day. So I didn't want to go to the late show. So I went to the early show, and I saw a friend coming in as I was leaving. And he said, "How was the show?" I said, "Oh, it's fantastic, man. You're going to love it. Flo and Eddie, it's great. You're going to love it." He calls me up the next day, and he goes, "Guess who sat in for the late show?" And I said, "Who's John and Yoko?"
John and Yoko.
So
and that live thing is on sometime in New York City, the John and Yoko, the second one of that. Yep. And so another little connection for me now being in Seattle is Flo and Eddie is on there as singers who used to be in the Turtles. And they do that song about the mud shark. The mud shark. Now, those of you who don't know the story, if you haven't heard it on my channel or others, Google Mothers of Invention, Fillmore, Mud Shark.
Mud Shark.
It references the Edgewater Hotel in Seattle about bands, I think it was either Led Zeppelin or Vanilla Fudge, they don't mention it in the song, that have their way with groupies and a mud shark. The Edgewater Hotel, in those days, you could literally fish out of the window. There's famous pictures of the Beatles there. What's great about it, it's an upscale hotel now, and they have it, but off the bar, in the lobby, there's a fireplace and beautiful lounge area with all these rock and roll pictures of Led Zeppelin and the Beatles and the Jackson 5 and the Monkees. So if we ever open up again, if the world opens up again and you're in Seattle, let's go have a drink. Anybody out there, we'll go to the Edgewater Hotel and have you guys can buy me a martini and I'll drive you to the Edgewater Hotel.
Sounds like a plan.
I'm ending my thing with one more venue.
I got one more too, so you go.
Okay. This is not a San Francisco venue. It's not a New York venue, but it's to me 2 major concerts I saw in 2002 and 2005 in London at the Royal Albert Hall. Of course, as a kid, hearing A Day in the Life, how many holes it filled the Albert Hall, it just became a thing. And I was fortunate enough because I'm a Beatle freak. I went to the concert for George.
Oh, wow.
It, was done 2 years after George died. Eric Clapton put it on. And great venue, an amazing venue, as we all know. And I went there to see the concert for George. This is a special limited edition. I'm not going to really show it, but if you haven't seen the documentary, the live concert film, you have to. 2 years later, I did go see. One band I always wanted to see that I never saw was Cream, so I went to see them at the Royal Albert Hall, the reunion tour. I didn't know they were going to do Madison Square Gardens the next year, but they did 5 shows at the Royal Albert Hall in 2005. And my buddy and I used our mileage on Virgin Atlantic, and we flew and went to see them at the Royal Albert Hall. So that's my no San Francisco connection, except for Wheels of Fire was recorded at Winterland. And I would miss that show. I was too young.
I got to see Cream twice, so that was
nice. And that was the better time. You saw them when they were on fire.
I saw them in it was my freshman year in college, so it was either winter '67, '68.
Yep.
And so yeah, that was a great show. So the last band I'm showing is the guy's actually from England, but the band was formed in New York, and it's sort of from left field.
Okay.
The Mahavishnu Orchestra.
Okay.
John McLaughlin. And I saw John McLaughlin with Santana opening up for Alice Coltrane.
Wow.
At Hunter College in New York City. So it was after this album, was when they had that album, the two of them with wearing white.
The whole spiritual jazz thing was happening then. Yeah.
But yeah, amazing guitar player, of course. And this album is just like ridiculous.
Mahavishnu and David Dip, Carl Santana.
Yeah, you got Billy Cobham on here, Jan Hammer, and so yeah, he was English, but the band was formed in New York, and they played in New York City.
I don't think I knew that John McLaughlin was English. That's funny.
Yes, yeah.
I believe you. I didn't know.
He might be Scottish, but I know he's in that UK area.
Okay.
But yeah, we went to Hunter College in New York, and Santana came out first by himself. And a woman was playing sort of like a drone instrument behind him, and he just played guitar, acoustic. Wow. And then he left, and then John McLaughlin came out with this woman who's playing a sort of a drone instrument. He played guitar. Then she left, and then Santana came out, and the two of them just jammed together for about a half hour, 45 minutes. Then they left, then Alice Coltrane came out, and then they all came out together. It was an amazing show. That was probably 74, 75, right around that era.
That makes sense. Yeah. Well, we were all lucky, have these East Coast and West Coast venues, being around the hub of New York. And obviously there's great places in Los Angeles and Chicago and London and everything. But
there's still great music today. It's just so expensive compared to what it was.
Well, yeah. I mean, again, I think I worked in a record store and I was making $3 an hour. And for 2 hours of work, you could buy a ticket to a show. And now, back in my day, 1907.
Back in my, I remember one of my first jobs they offered me was $13,000 a year, and I was like, $13,000, man! Well, I can afford an apartment in New York City. I can live. I can.
Well, a house was about $13,000 then too. So yeah.
Anyway, this is great, man. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. This is East versus West, West versus East, and you didn't even bring up East West, that great song by the Paul Butterfield Blues Band,
which I got.
That's an incredible record. Right?
Yeah,
I love that record.
And that one you turned me on to, the Dave Alvin one.
And they cover that. They
turned me on to that. It's fantastic, man. I went out and bought it right away. It's just so great.
Well, comment. I'll put a link to Jonathan's channel if you don't know it already, and you should subscribe.
I'm having a contest on my channel.
Oh,
I just did. It's just 800 subscribers.
Okay, we got to enter the contest. East West, write your East West bands. We broke the rules, or I broke the rules more than he did, but that's the way it happens. That's what I always do. So, Matt loves you. Thank you for watching.
Peace out.